So this project has multiple different techniques in here. So I'm going to be moving around and showing you quite a few different things. So I'm just going into them on not such a deep level, some of them, and you can always look up anywhere in my records in here to find more detail on each technique. So this is what we're doing. I'm actually building, I spent some time with a friend of mine who has a bike shop, and I decided to do these really cool pieces that are just little books, little messages that I put together, but inside bike spokes. So this actually is the case where I'm putting this with mixed media, so I decided to do a rivet. That works best if I just have loose paper. These are loose paper. So here is our project. I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna start with a photocopy of an image, and so I cut it out small, and what I'm gonna do, this is a piece of 22 gauge, let me write this on here because it might be, it's always good to write what gauge this is, so I'm gonna write down a 22 gauge just to make sure that once I use it, I've got it written on here and it's not gonna get lost. You can always test it out later, but okay, so there's that. Here's my rubber cement. I'm gonna put some rubber cement, and the crazy thing is, this was my last container and I couldn't get it open, so I had to do a little drilling through here. So let me I'm gonna pour some out my drilled hole. Voila, getting a little bit of this out, putting it on a little bit here. You don't want too much, but I'm just gonna put a little bit on my silver, and then I'm just gonna put my piece on here, nice, all the way up to the edges. I just need it right up to the edges. This will come off with the pickle later if, this will come off with the pickle later if there's any problems. So there we go. You know, this excess here, I'm not gonna worry about it. But I do wanna make sure I bend back some of this. I don't wanna waste any silver. Silver's expensive lately, right? So I'm gonna put this all like this, and there we go. It's glued down. Okay. Luckily, I have another one that's dry. You wanna really wait till it's dry. You don't want it sloshing all over. You could sometimes, start with it in this way. So I am gonna cut out all of the white areas, and that's what I did. I did quite a few of these, but I'm just gonna cut out the white areas. So the first thing that I wanna do, the paper will help this stick a little bit here, but I am going to just go ahead and do a drill hole right here to be able to get in here and get it going. I'm gonna hold my metal down as I drill, nice and quick. Got my hole. Now I'm gonna move over to my jeweler's saw right here, on this edge. Okay. And I'm gonna do one more drill hole, and that's gonna be right in the center, and this is how I will be doing my rivet attachment in a little bit. So let me set this down on here. It should be able to, there it goes. Goes a nice easy, but I'm holding it flat. So now I've got my 2 holes in here, and that pretty much is, I'm gonna need a lot of holes actually. I have to get in and out of each of these negative sections. So I'm gonna go around into each of these white areas here, because I need to get in individually. Drill through each of these areas. There we go. This is so I can get in and out with my jeweler's saw in all these areas. And then the one in the center is for the attachment later on. So come on over here to my jeweler's saw. Okay, I am using a green lion. This one gives me so much control. And jeweler's saw, I have a whole film on that, but for now, I'm gonna show you guys, I need to back out just a little bit, and I'm gonna show you guys how to get your jeweler's saw threaded up on here, just in case you haven't. I'm using 03 jeweler blades, so these are my blades. So they're 3/0, but they actually have the 0 in the front. And I have fastened this into here, and when I want this nice and tight, and when you know it's put on right, your blade When you move forward, you'll feel you're going against the grain. It should be nice and smooth this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean into my jeweler's saw. Place of your body that you want it to be nice and tight. I'm going to make this a little bit more taut. There we go. Lean into it. So you want this to be nice. Voila. Okay. So I've got this nice and taut. And then what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of this. Now, actually, I closed this up because I showed you how to do it. But one thing I need to do is to thread this on. So this is why the jeweler saw. It's the only tool. Some people don't like it, some people like it, but it's the only tool that's going to get you to the inside of all this negative space. This takes you a little while. I wear my magnifiers, and you want to give good support on both sides. I'm going to move all the way to the back area. And then to turn, I'm a little bit more level with it than I normally am. And you just want your piece to stay in one spot. Let your jeweler's saw do the work. I'm trying to show you guys without covering it up. Okay. And then when I get to an area where I'm going to turn, I'm just going to very, very gently turn my saw and move in. Follow the straight line. Let your jeweler's saw do the work. So actually, I'm going to use a minute here and just teach you a little bit about the jeweler's saw. This actually tool, like I said, is the only one that you'll be able to get to the inside of your metal. There's so many people who don't like the jeweler's saw at all. But you know what I say? I say that this is just a good way to do your meditate. Let me take it off of here. Because remember, for each of these bicycle spokes, I'm going to have to remove this. So this spot is cut out here, and I'm going to keep the rest on. But when you're going into this, you really have to be relaxed. So many people think that to go into metal, you have to have a really strong, like push and push. The best thing to do, if you ever see white knuckles on your hands, you know that you are working way too hard, and you just need to really back off. So there's the traditional jeweler saws that I used for many, many years. I think I have one in here. I used these for many years, these jeweler saws. And there are a lot of different, oh my gosh, I haven't used it in a while. But I used to use this back when I was in my 20s. I'll show it to you guys here. This is, I did really big, I need a little bit more room. I did really big mixed media pieces, so I would use really big soft frames like this. So, in this you'd get into it this way. You can see that you can only get so far. So when I'm working with the piece, I have to work, this is perfect for jewelry. But if I was working on a large scale, I can only get in so far to my metal. So I would work with pieces like this way back then because I was doing really large sculptural type pieces. So, but these saws are very inexpensive, but you don't really get the strength that I do with this Green Lion. So this is one of my very favorites. It has a really good place to grip, when you hold onto your piece. So some of the most important things when you're using your jeweler saw is you have to have your blade super, super tight. So when I was showing you leaning into my piece, and I'll show you that again, it's like here's my jeweler saw here, and here I just usually put in the corner of where my bench block is, and I am just going to lean into it to try to crunch this area up as much as I can. See, I'm pushing it together, and then what I do is I cinch it inside. And when I cinch it inside with a piece, I just get it this way. You want of course, your paper side up. I'm going to string this on. So at the same time, I pull back on my blade and I move forward, and you want this as tight as you possibly can get this. And that means If you're able to play a tune on here, you know you've got it tight enough. Okay, one of the next important elements in the jeweler saw to really enjoy it is to make sure it's lubricated. So this one is from Pepe. There's a lot of different waxes that you can just wax on your pieces. And this is nice and lubricated, so that means it's just gonna flow right through my jeweler saw. Step number 3 with the jeweler saw, what you wanna do is when you're sawing, this is a 22 gauge and I'm using an 0.3. So really if you want your metal to be able to fit right between the blade here, and this one fits beautifully right between the blade, then you know it's the exact, the exact right saw blade, that the 0.3. So you're gonna wanna go like an 0.1 would be more for an 18 gauge or, a 16 gauge. You're gonna use, the lower the number, the lower the number in your saw blade is the same, the higher the number in your sheet metal. Does that make sense? Okay, so with this now, once you get started, I want to be able to hold this straight up and down like this. So, you really want only one blade, 2 blades going through your silver at any given moment. So you're going to know the angle that you need. So in going through, the angle is actually just a very, very slight bend forward. See this? When I get up to the end, and here's another rule for you, rule number, I don't know what number I'm on, but I'll list them later, is when I'm making a turn, you want to hold it straight up and down and just very, very gently. You're almost creating a little hole in a divot right here when I'm moving and creating. So now I have a nice little pocket here where I have turned and I can move forward. The next rule is you want to be able to hold this down like on both sides. And when you start getting into 24 gauge, 22 gauge is a nice gauge because I can hold this down and it doesn't buckle. When you start getting into 24 gauge, sometimes the edges want to buckle up on you. So it all needs to be laying down flat. Next rule, wear your binoculars, wear your magnifiers, because your magnifiers I can see and have really good light. I can see straight up and down. I can follow my lines, which gives me confidence, makes me feel good. And I'm going to pivot my jeweler saw and move forward. Don't push forward on it is the next rule. Do not push forward. So literally I'm letting my tool do the work for me. Very gently turn it. I'm letting my saw blade do the work for me. You can keep it straight or turn it any way that's better for you, but this gives you a straight line. When you have a straight line, defined very strongly, you'll be able to follow a straight line. You can always use a cleanup tool, or you can always use a little bit of a file afterwards, of course, with your piece. So see, we're getting along pretty good with the piece here. I've got some good negative space in here. So some other rules would be, you really want to watch your posture. I always talk about posture and things. Some people, it drives them crazy, but you know what? I have been a jeweler and at this bench for 25 years, all different, and an artist for 35 years. So for me, if I watch my posture, if I make sure my wrists are good, I can be at this for a very long time. Put a little bit more lubricant on here, lube it up, and get back in here. So my back is straight. My feet are flat on the ground. This is at the perfect height to me. I want to make sure I have really good light. And I'm just going to move forward. And 2 blades through the metal at any given time, and that's all you really need. I'm being very gentle. I always say, think of yourself as a beautiful ballerina sitting at this table. Put on some nice, mellow music. I like listening to my spa music. That's what I like. And you should hear a nice, even rhythm. Nice, beautiful, even rhythm. So if you're trying to hurry, you cannot hurry with this. If you're trying to hurry, you'll end up pushing it through. So it's like your knuckles, they can't be white, they just need to be loose. You're really getting your workout right here on this bicep. On your right bicep, you're also getting a workout here by just holding your piece down and holding it straight. So that's really about all the rules that there is. But trust me, it's like you could learn to love your jeweler's saw. You know, just put the right music on. Think of it as just, you know, you're going to be here for a good 20 minutes. You know, one of the things, that's one of the reasons why, you know, I love coming in a relaxed mood. Anytime I would come in hectic and angry to my bench, it's like, forget it. I'm going to break 100 saw blades. Back in jeweler school, you know, you would get judged by the saw blades that you broke. Why? Because, you know, it just, they say it makes you a good jeweler or it doesn't make you a good jeweler. Most jewelers don't really like the saw blade, you know, but you have to find a way to love it because it is a big part of precision in your work. Yeah, sometimes I use snips if it's just circles and easy things like that. I might use a snip just to cut out around the outside. Actually, here I'm going to use my jeweler's saw. But, you know, once I get this cut out, I'll be cutting out around the sides. And, you know, you can build this. This is building it with sheet metal. There certainly are different times where I like building this with, like building the same technique with wire. But this is sheet metal, so it should be pretty easy. So that's about all the tips that I have for the jeweler saw, but it really is enjoyable. Put on your relaxed music and you should be good to go. Okay. I cut, this is about a 20 gauge, maybe, no, these are actually 22. I'm putting them right in the flux. And I'm going to actually use these as attachments for later. I want to get everything on here. You can see I hardly had to do any soldering, but I'm going to spritz these with a little Flex 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and solder onto here. Warm these up. Just solder a little medium onto here. Why not medium? And then I'm just going to leave them as I work. So I've got my medium solder right here. Just going to heat up my pick. That's the way I love doing it. I'm going to put it right onto the edge. There we go. You saw that flow. And I really just try to use a little tiny bit. There we go. And then I get my lock-in pliers. And I'm going to put this back in the flex just to cool it off. Because I'm just going to lay this right on here and attach it. Probably right here I'll do it. Now remember, I always talk about soldering. You have to go back and watch my soldering philosophy. So 90% of the solder is going to be on this wheel, and about, well, let's say 3% is going to be on my wire. There we go. And then you can't move it, let it cool, and you quench it. We're just going to keep this top on it for now. And the same thing with this one. I'm going to reflex it again. And come right over here, heat this up. See how I just have it hovering? So I'm heating this up like 98% of the heat goes here. There we go. Oop. Okay. Okay. Okay, these I'm just putting on to have, because once I get my whole piece together, I'll use this. Once I get my whole piece together, I'll use these two to combine and do an attachment. It'll be better. Okay, so let me pickle these up, and then I'm going to get everything polished because I'm done soldering, and I'm going to show you a wire rivet.
Okay, ready?
Yep. Okay, so I am going to now build a rivet. Here's my two pieces. So the thing that I wanted to say, these are going to be riveted together with the paper in the center. I want to keep both of these attachments up top, and I'll show you what I'll do to them later. So anyway, these two pieces are done except for adding the paper and stacking everything in. So I'm going to make the rivet right now. And so when you're, you know, this is actually really makes it possible. I'm going to use, I used a 52. There's another there's another piece on YouTube that goes into details on all the rules for riveting. But for now, I used a 52 drill bit or a 1/16 drill bit, and I'm gonna make a rivet here out of steel, out of 16 gauge steel. So what I'm gonna do is just clamp in my wire, nice and straight, right here. I don't want it too high. I don't want it too low. I want it just right, so about right there. The thing I love about steel is that I can really tighten this up nice and tight, and I'm not gonna have a problem with this collapsing or being squished, you know. If I'm using silver or bronze, that problem sometimes arises. I'm gonna use my ball peen hammer, which is right here, and I'm just really gonna be pushing this out from all directions because I'm creating a nail head rivet. And I'm very, very gently, you can hear how gentle. Think of doing 500 hits and you'll get your rivet right. I don't need it spread too wide. We don't want it to take up all the room. But I do want it to have a lip around all the sides. Ooh, it's beautiful. I can feel it. There's a gorgeous, gorgeous lip all the way around. Now, you can see my wire's a little bit bent, so I'm going to go back in, straighten this out. There we go. Nice straight edge here. Okay. So I've got one edge on here, and we're getting close to being done, but I'm going to have you guys come on over to where I'm drilling, which is right over here, and we're going to drill through everything. Okay, so I cut out this gorgeous little stack of paper right here. These were books that these were being thrown away. I was out in Paris, and they were throwing away all of these hand-typed books that were so beautiful. So I did get these beautiful books. I love them so much, but I was able to, you know, use them also in my work, which is amazing. So what I did, you just cut them into small pieces. You know, you cut them into a nice square shape, your paper, and then you just round them out with your scissors. Any kind of scissors, nice sharp scissors for paper. And then I cut them to size so I could get them right onto here. So that's the way I'm gonna start. I've got my paper in here. I'm just gonna drill through one side because my other side is already drilled through. You can see that right here. So this is where I wanna make sure I hold everything down so carefully. This is still my 52 bit, and I mean my 52, bit, and I'm just gonna, remember when I talk about straight up and down? This has to be straight up and down, and I'm pretty sure it is, although, okay, ready, gonna drill straight through. Okay, now, before I do any kind of adjustments, I made this rivet already with you, showed you my rivet. I'm just pushing everything through right now before moving anything. Because the last thing you wanna do is have to string all this paper on one by one. And voila, you have a beautiful edge here. And now what I'm gonna do is string this piece on. I wanna make sure that I keep this wire on the inside. I'm just gonna get this in like this. There we go, see how that's gonna look? And I'll figure out my closure later. I could actually use an extra easy to even, you know, connect this together, but I might just want to wrap on this. I kind of like the idea of doing so much of these cold joints here. Okay, I can do a really flush rivet right here. So I want to make sure I'm going to press this as tight as I can, and I rest my pliers here, and then I just bring them up like 1/4 of an inch above. 1/8 of an inch above. Like you'll see how little. This is all I need. You can see that tiny little bit right there. And you can actually come in super close and let me get my riveting hammer, which is behind me. Now, whoops, you guys got to hear things going on in my studio. I'm gonna use, this is a Frets riveting hammer. This side here is called riveting hammer, but this is where there's people that just like doing X's on their work. This one is a little bit of a ball peen. You can see it there. And this is going to help me again, just to keep spreading out my wire, my steel wire. And I'm just spreading it in all directions. At least I'll spread it 2 ways. I'm spreading it forward to you and backward to me. And then I can move it around a little bit to get at a different angle. And with this rivet, you could put anything behind here that you wanted to. This one is a nice simple one. But, you know, I show ways you can rivet stone on stone. And just think of the paper as, you know, you could actually put gems on the end of here. And I'm pushing everything down, so when it goes back into shape, there, I want a nice little beveled edge. You can see it didn't do any damage to my silver. I want to make sure, ooh, this end looks so good too. And now I've got this gorgeous stack in here like this. So once this is done, I can go in, everything's in shape. I can go in and make sure my edges are all straight and the way that they want to be. Pretty cool charm, isn't it? And I just go through with a file, you know, and I can hit different areas of paper with a file. Just a little bit, if I want my paper. Yeah, you can file paper. Isn't that interesting? You could file paper. Of course you could file paper. Okay. And now for the last thing that I'm going to do, maybe back out a little bit. I'm going to bring this over here. And this is just the simplest attachment of all. Yeah. I'm going to actually just draw a bead on the end of each of these and make just a little twist on here. So what that'll be is I'm going to put both ends in a little bit of flux because that gives me a nice, beautiful edge on here. Separate them out. Now this is all, hang on a second. Okay, now these are dirty again because I just got done, you know, I just got done drawing a bead. But I wanted to say, when you put your rivet onto your piece, you absolutely wait. It's the last thing that you will do is put your rivets in. So, you know, I had my piece liver sulfured. It was all completely done up the way I wanted it to be. So I'll probably just, I'm going to show you this now, but then I'll polish everything up. Just do a little twist together, make it nice and long. You can make it as long or as short. And I am just going to do a little bend over. You can see how long I'm going to make this piece. Get my pliers out. So I think what I'll do is I'll bring this end down. Just a different kind of attachment. Why not? Bring this end down like this. And use this extra piece just to bring it around. Just make it a little industrial. Why not? And when I get around to the end, like I have this here, I can bring up my end that I started with, and I can do a little twist together with these two pieces. Give me just a little bit of a look, right? There we go. Okay. Lay these down, get them polished up, make sure everything is exactly the way I want it. There we go. You know, or if I had to do any soldering, I could solder with an extra EZ. It's far enough away where it's not going to bother my piece right here. So that's what I'm talking about, guys. This is your project. So you get to learn jeweler's saw, a little bit of soldering, a little bit of riveting, a little bit of paper cutting, mixed media project. Enjoy.